as Charlene was going through that, how many of you were thinking, oh, what's the next one? What's the next one? You know? Yeah, you were thinking it too. Yeah. I read a survey several years ago that an overwhelming number of Americans said we should all follow the Ten Commandments, and then they asked the interviewees to name the Ten Commandments, and I think the average was about 6 out of 10. Yeah. Last week I mentioned that I've taken some courses at Ohio State. In the fall I took a course in the history of Mexico, because I thought all the trips I've taken to Piedras Negras, I don't know the people whose names are on all these streets, and it would be nice to learn all these street names and the historical figures behind them. This semester I'm taking a course entitled Revolutions and Social Movements in Modern Latin America. Doesn't that sound neat? It's always been an interest of mine, so I thought, man, they've got a course exactly what I'm interested in. So far this semester, we've gone through the Mexican, the Cuban, the Guatemalan, the Nicaraguan, and the Chilean revolutions. And one of the things I've noticed is that the revolutions are caused 99% of the time by repression, by a small group of people owning almost all the businesses and all the lands. There's lots of poverty, illiteracy, high infant mortality. And these are the causes of the revolutions. And when the side wins and they set up a new constitution, the Constitution is usually a reaction about why they revolted in the first place. So when you have this Constitution, you will usually have things in it like land reform. The peasants will get the land, the farmers will get land. You will have things in it like education. Everybody will have access to free education. People will have access to free health care. The economy will be diversified so not one country can control all the goods coming out of this Latin American country. And the purpose of these constitutions is so that the society won't go back to the way it was, and it'll go forward and flourish and prosper for all people. Now, the United States had a revolution, and you could argue to a degree that our Constitution, in many ways, is a reaction to what caused the revolution. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. There will be no state religion. There are things in it like you cannot quarter soldiers in a person's house. Well, that's a direct response to what the British were doing to the colonists. There's a limit on how long a person can be a leader. And our Constitution is also so that our society will not go back to the way it was, but will go forward. Now, you all memorize this, and you can repeat it with me, the preamble to the Constitution. This is the purpose of our Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, do you remember it? Establish justice. That's a reaction. Ensure domestic tranquility. Provide for the common defense. Promote the general welfare. And ensure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity. We're going to go forward with our new words to live by. The new Constitution that will create a new community, a new country. Now, we just had what's called the Ten Commandments. I don't know if it comes across so well in the movie, the Ten Commandments. But that is a response to a revolution. It's probably the first revolution in recorded history. I don't know, probably could be wrong. But it's one of the first revolutions recorded. It was a slave uprising. And there was repression. The male babies were being killed. Their land was taken, and a small group owned their land. And there was hunger, and there was poverty. And the slaves rebelled. And what we see in the Ten Commandments is the Constitution that these slaves have created to create a new society, a community of God's people that will be loving and just and free, and it will develop and flourish. And you can see things in the Ten Commandments that you wouldn't see in Egypt. The obvious one is, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of slavery in Egypt. They've got a new God. They've switched churches. They've switched religions. They've thrown out the old God who was repressive. You see, you take a day off because slaves don't take days off, but you're not slaves anymore. You take a day off. The Ten Commandments, I'd like us to see as kind of the constitution for the Hebrews. It's their words to live by. Now, one of the reasons I'd like for us to see it as a constitution is I find that when we talk about commandments, it kind of gets our backbone up and we get fearful and we think God's out to get us and pushing us around, and there are consequences to these commandments. Constitution enables us to prosper, and I think that's what these words do. First of all, in the Bible, it's not called the Ten Commandments. It's called the 10 Words. It's the 10 Words. God gave these words. So they are words to live by. It's also, I am the God who brought you out of slavery. That's giving you these words. It's a gracious God. It's a generous God. It's a saving God. It's a God who wants the best for us. And the rest of the words kind of describe what this God is like. Some people don't also like the notion of commandment because, again, I said it's God pushing us around. But you look at some of these commandments and you want to say, oh, a day off. Well, I don't like that. God's making me take a day off. Take a day off. And in this word, God doesn't even say you have to go to church. Now, I kind of feel like I'm slitting my throat there. But God doesn't say you have to go to church. What God says is rest and delight in creation. Take joy in the Lord's world. Take joy in the Lord's community. And that can be expressed in lots of ways. And recreate yourself. Who would be against that? It's a gracious, generous God who gives this to us. Other people don't like it that these 10 words have so many don'ts. Do not kill, do not steal, do not. Why is it so negative? I'm reminded of, on the 50th anniversary of the Selma March, a politician asked, got in Martin Luther King's face about some of the civil rights actions, and King's response was, I'm not asking you to love us. I'm just asking you to stop lynching us. And I think that's kind of where we are with these 10 words. Not asking you to love me, just don't kill me. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to not rob. When you think about these 10 words, it does kind of create a community of love and freedom and justice. I think most of us would like to live in a community that's described by these 10 words. I'd like to live in a community where there's no killing. I mean, wouldn't we? I'd like to live in a community where there's no stealing. I mean, I'd like to walk down the street at night and feel safe. It'd be kind of nice not to lock my door. You know, I'd like to live in a community where there's no lying. You think of these 10 words, what would we add? I'm thinking maybe I'd add something on ecology. What would we subtract? Some people think we can subtract the first three. The first three. You shall have no gods before me. Some people think that's not necessary. But if we had no God before the God who brought us out of slavery, what would we have? Nothing? Or would we replace it with something else? And what would we replace it with? Power? Money? Violence? We've tried that. You shall have no graven images. You shall have no idols. Idolatry is really nothing more than worshiping myself. I worship an idol because it gets me what I want. So I'm just worshiping myself. Shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Don't take God lightly. Don't use God for my ends. Don't act like God endorses everything I do. Don't act like God endorses our nation, our economic system, our wars, our church, our prejudices. Don't use God's name for your ends. I find when those three are ignored, it's easy to violate the rest of them. It's easier to kill. It's easier to lie. It's easier to steal. Now, one could do a sermon series on the 10 words, a 10-part sermon. And you didn't come for that today. But I'm going to go through the rest of them pretty fast. So I've done the first three. What's the fourth? You can't answer. What's the fourth? Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath. Already done that. See how fast this is going to go? What's the fifth? Honor your mother and father. You know, our lives are defined by our relationship. I am the son of Clarence and Doris Keeny. I am the brother of Anne. I am the husband of Susan. I am the father of Nick, Maria, and Elena. I am Colleen's co-worker. I am Howard Fratkin's neighbor. Our lives are defined by our relationships. And our first relationship is with our parents. It's with our parents. And the thing is, we didn't get to pick our parents, did we? And some of us I wish I had a different set of parents sometimes. I'm sure my kids wish they had a different set of parents at times. But that's the given in our lives. And we might as well grow up loving what's given in our relationships. Honor your father and your mother so that you can love others, so that you can be become a loving person in all your relationships. And your life will be long. Well, yeah, if we're loving, our life will be long and rich. What's the next one? What's the sixth? Do not kill. And it's homicide that they're talking about. Life is sacred and inviolable. My life is sacred. Your life is sacred. Life is not disposable. What's the next? Adultery. Do not commit adultery. Marriage is sacred and inviolable. Sexuality cannot be reduced to treating people as objects or as body parts. Sexuality is a full relationship with a person. Do not steal. Things are sacred and inviolable. The earth is not to be looted or plundered, and neither is my neighbor, and neither is another country. Do not bear false witness against your neighbor. Do not lie. Words are sacred and inviolable. What kind of society would we have where lying was official and accepted, where you could not rely on anybody's words? You could not trust them. Thou shalt not covet. This one and the Sabbath word are unique in that society. Taking a day off was unique to the Hebrews, and coveting, mentioning coveting, was unique. Coveting is in the mind. Everything else that's mentioned is an action. Wendell Berry says, we'd rather have our neighbor's land than our neighbor. We'd rather have our neighbor's house than our neighbor. You know, and you think about coveting, it does lead to almost every other of the 10 words. When we covet, we are more likely to steal. When we covet, we are more likely to kill. When we covet, we are more likely to lie. When we covet, we are more likely to commit adultery. And the thing about coveting is it's so unhappy. It's so unhappy. We're fantasizing about having another person's life. These are the words to live by. These are the words to live by. And I've used constitution. The Bible would say covenant. This is the covenant that the people are entering into. Last week, we talked about Abraham, where God said, walk with me. Well, what does that look like? What does walking with God look like? Well, in this covenant, we get a picture of what walking with God looks like. Take a day off and delight in it. Enjoy creation. Honor your relationships. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery. Walk with me and be trustworthy. And these are the words you'll live by. Now, I know this doesn't say enough. It doesn't get into forgiveness. It doesn't get into actually loving. But we're heading toward the new covenant on Thursday of Holy Week, where Jesus really fleshes this all out. But for the time being, these words do make us better people, and they make us better to live with. And Colleen said 2 weeks ago that we should examine these covenants during Lent. And I would encourage you to examine this covenant to see how we're doing in the words God gave us to live by. May it be so.